We're going to start this podcast with a story, and here's the phrase: 31 flavors. You know, like Baskin Robbins. And I
That's been my mantra for years.
Arlington Road. I came home to Baltimore. We screened it at the Maryland Film Festival, and my mother. I said, "Mom, some people really don't like the movie," and my mother said, "Fuck them. That's why there's 31 flavors." You got to give props to Mickey Pellington.
Hello and welcome everyone to a very special edition of Podcasting Them Softly. This is Nick. I'm here with Frank, and we're extremely lucky and excited to have feature film director Mark Pellington joining us today for a chat about his very eclectic and exciting career. Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. Been new fans of yours, and thank you for the support, and look forward to chatting.
Dude, before we actually start with the podcast, I just got to gush, and I got to tell you how much I just fucking love that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first saw it on VOD, I was just amazed by it. And I watched it twice, and I made my roommate watch it with me, and he was emotionally scarred, but he got over it. And I mean, it's just...
Yeah, you get over
holy
it.
Holy fuck, man. Yeah, but I mean, the movie stuck with me for so long. I sprung it on Nick for our podcast. We were initially going to do something different, and then I'm like, let's do I Melt With You, and he's like, I Melt With You. He's like, I haven't seen that in forever. I'm like, dude, we're going to do it. And not many people that listen to us that are our followers watch it, but a lot of people checked it out afterwards.
Good.
And quite a few of them liked it.
Oh, good. Good. Well, you know what? It's not many people end up in the middle on that thing. You know what I mean? Not a lot.
Right.
People are just like, how old are you guys?
I'm 30.
Oh, so
I'm 30. I'm 35.
All right, so that must have hit differently for you at 45 than the young 30-year-old who's got his whole life ahead of him.
I'm 35.
35. All right, well, you're a little closer to the end.
Yep.
At 30, you're like, what the fuck are you doing at 30? Come on, man. You're in your prime. Are you sitting in your apartment? Where do you live? Where do you guys live?
I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and yeah, I'm in my condo right now.
Mm-hmm. And
I live in Connecticut with my wife, Erica. She's actually sitting right here.
Hi, Erica.
And yeah, we have a house in Connecticut.
And how are you guys partners in Chicago and Connecticut?
Frank and I sort of bonded through mutual friends on Facebook and through a lot of similar tastes in films, especially like The Tree of Life. That was a big one for us, and the works of Michael Mann. And that's sort of how we sort of just came together. And, you know, before you knew it, Frank said, Nick, you know, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? And I always wanted to do one. I'm just not very good with technological stuff. I'm sort of like, you know, if Frank calls me at the time that we're ready to go, you know, I'll be there to talk. So I took it as a chance to finally do something I wanted to do. And, you know, I can't believe that in 10 weeks we've done 10 shows or 11 shows, and, you know, it's just totally wild. So it's been a lot of fun. It's actually really cool to finally talk to somebody on Facebook who you've never met, and it becomes like a real relationship, a real friendship. So it's really cool.
So you've never met in real life?
No.
Right.
Not yet, but
actually know if he's sitting there really with his wife. This is all a catfish.
It could be a catfish situation. No, we've seen each other on, I think, one video call. So I have an idea. I inspired Frank also to take advantage of his manly looks and model himself after Colin Farrell in Miami Vice. So we've had some fun with that.
I used to have a beard, and then Nick talked me into doing the Colin Farrell 2000 Sonny Crockett with the handlebar mustache and the soul patch. So, I mean, I've been called a pedophile and that I look like a biker, but I mean, it's been pretty good mix. You know, the reviews have been mixed, but fuck them, whatever. I'm gonna rock it.
You know, pedophile bite. Yeah, some people take it as a compliment. The whole pedophile thing rubs people the wrong way. Oh shit! I understand.
Fuck them. I mean, whatever.
But it's just. But at the core, you're film geeks who merged your mutual film love and fused it together to, you know, banter back and forth and coalesce ideas into spreading the word of movies you like, right?
That's exactly the deal.
Yeah, because you're not getting paid for it, right? You're not monetized yet.
Nope, I've got a day job. Frank's got a day job. This is all done because of, born out of a passion for movies. I had a chance in my 20s to work over at Bruckheimer, actually, when you were doing episodes of Cold Case. I remember seeing...
You worked at Bruckheimer? Who'd you work for there?
I did, I started off as an intern in college, and then when I graduated from school, they were very, very nice and generous. They hired me, I was an intern junior year. I went back to school senior year. I kept in touch with them. Christiane Reed, formerly Christiane Grolinger.
Yeah, Christiane's she's the one who's hired me. I just did a pilot for them in November based on the Cocaine Cowboys documentary. We did
wow.
Elmore Leonard.
I love that documentary. Great documentary. You're doing it.
Yeah. Great documentary, but we did it. We did the pilot for TNT. It was written by the woman, Michelle Ashford, who wrote Masters of Sex. So the tone was not, the tone was, again, I'll say Elmore Leonard. So it was a great opportunity for me to get a monkey off of my back of I can't do comedy and drama. She said, just keep watching Shampoo. And I was like, Hal Ashby is a really unique tone. Now, the two movies I've done that mix comedy and drama, Henry Poole and Going All the Way, to me are very flawed. Scene by scene, they're fine, but the balance of the tone, I think, was a little bit not great, And Henry Poole better than the first one. But this Cocaine Cowboys, I loved what we did, but Kevin Riley, the new head of TNT, came in after we had made the pilot and was like, oh, I wanted the dark and violent Cocaine Cowboys. So, you do all that work and just, flies away. Just goes away. We did it for Jerry and Michael Bay. They were the producers. And Christiane. And shot it in Puerto Rico, Miami for the 70s. It's awesome. But nobody will ever see it. That's the thing. You do a pilot, no one will ever...
That's a huge bummer because that was a great doc, and they had talked about, Bruckheimer had been talking about doing that forever with various directors and people attached to it. So that's a shame that it never went. But yeah, no, I had a chance to do some stuff there. I was their development runner. I ran around town doing all their errands, making script copies. And then they got me a job over with Tony Scott and Ridley Scott, and I was over there when he was doing Spy Game. And he was prepping, doing the background research on Domino and Man on Fire. And then I did some work on Seabiscuit, and then I did some work at some agencies, and then reality TV. And then my wife and I were like, you know what? We'd rather kind of just chill out in our home state and buy a house and live a little more of a simpler life. And I was sort of really over the congestion and the traffic and the craziness of Los Angeles. I'm a true East Coaster at heart. I love the seasons, and it's just really my place. I really wanted to be, but just an amazing experience I had in my 20s, and I, like I said to you earlier in our early sort of talking on Facebook, I still will never forget the time that you humored me at In-N-Out Burger. I'm serious. That was the coolest thing ever. You probably don't remember. I have no reason to, but one day after I played golf at a pitch and putt, we were in there having lunch, and you came in, and I totally lost it on you about Arlington Road. And you actually talked to me for a few minutes. So I always kept that in my pocket as a sign. I always kept it in my pocket as a sign that they're cool people.
You actually talked to me oh my God, who wouldn't talk to people? David Spade? But you brought up, the two most important words that you brought up in your last monologue were Tony Scott. And Tony Scott, I love Tony Scott. I've been known to say on a set, fuck off, what would Tony Scott do? I did a pilot with Jeffrey Kimball, who probably paid me the compliment, who said, you know what, you remind me of Tony. You have no fear. You just like to shoot. So he said that to me, Jeffrey Kimball. And then on our last pilot, the Steadicam guy and operator was a guy named Chief. And Chief was Tony's team. And just told me stories and just how fucking like insanely demanding he was, but how fair and how like what a good guy he was, and just it was all about the shot and getting the shots, and said, fuck it, let's go, and getting on the ground. And Paul Cameron told me the same shit after Man on Fire. So Tony Scott, man, that guy was like, give him a great script. He's amazing. Give him a dog shit script. You know, like no matter how great it looks, you can't elevate it if it's not on the page. That's something I've learned over time. You know, look at Domino and Unstoppable.
Domino for me is without a doubt, that's my favorite Tony Scott movie because
really?
I feel, yeah, because and you have to understand too, I was a disciple of Tony Scott. I basically went out to Hollywood because I just needed to meet Tony Scott. That was pretty much my whole deal. As a high schooler, I was obsessed with his work, and I have come to just love Domino because it sort of represented this ability for an artist to push his form in a way that he was never really allowed to do. And when I was working there, he was so excited about Domino, and I remember Richard Kelly coming in and like getting them lunch and listening to them talk, and it was just, I know that it's his.
Great, but I don't think do you think the script was great? Do you think it was?
I love the script. I really love the script. I've watched the movie, honestly, Mark. Like I've probably seen it 20 times. Like I saw it 5 times.
You're seeing it a little bit differently than I. I've only seen it twice. I'll revisit it.
You have to remember, the movie's being told by someone who's tripping out on mescaline.
Yeah.
So that's like the first fun aspect of this movie, that, you know, she's a mildly unreliable narrator, and I loved the intensity, and I loved the fuck it all spirit of it, and how Tony basically said, this is the chance that I get to work with $50 million of independently financed money, and no studio bean counter is looking over my shoulder and telling me no. And from everything I knew about him, and again, I only worked for him for about 7 months, and everything I knew about the guy, that movie suggests to me that was his, like, the synthesis of his passions and enjoyments for living on the edge and being crazy and trying something new. But I think it's a polarizing movie, no doubt. I mean, I'm on the way end of the spectrum because a lot of people do not like that film.
Yeah, what did the audience say about the movie? How is it?
People hate it.
Yeah, well, there you go. You like movies that people hate.
Fuck the people.
I mean, that's the other thing too, is that, like,
no, you can't say that. You just have to be back.
Really? You made a melon.
We're gonna start this podcast with a story, and here's the phrase: 31 flavors. You know, like Baskin Robbins. And I remember
that's been my mantra for years.
Arlington Road. I came home to Baltimore. We screened it at the Maryland Film Festival, and I said, "Mom, some people really don't like the movie." And my mother said, "Fuck them. That's why there's 31 flavors." And just to that day, it's like you cannot please everybody. I don't care if you get 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's consensus and there's polarized reactions, you know. And as Inaratu said, we're not making hamburgers, right? Like, okay, who the fuck cares? You're not making something for everybody, and there you go. And some people like it, some people don't.
Very nice, very nice. And just for the uninitiated, Mark Pellington is the director of acclaimed thrillers Arlington Road and The Mothman Prophecies, and he most recently directed on the big screen the gut-wrenching psychological drama I Melt With You. He's influential and avid music video director since the 80s, and he's worked with just an amazing array of bands, In Excess, Pearl Jam, U2, just to name a few. He's also the executive producer and the director of the pilot for the upcoming NBC series Blind Spot. And obviously no stranger to the TV world. He's done numerous episodes of television, worked on Jerry Bruckheimer's Cold Case, as well as doing an episode of Homicide: Life in the Street. Very influential TV show right there. And his new short film, Lone, is available to be streamed via iTunes and Amazon, and seems to find him embarking on new artistic ground. A very exciting short film, showcasing his really exciting sense of style, very dynamic visuals, and it's also a further reminder that while he is a great stylist with the camera. He's also very interested in motivation and character, and always having an overlying message of intelligence. So thanks again, Mark, for coming on the show. And why don't we just get right into Lone, because obviously that's your newest piece for people to see on a wide availability. How did it come about, and how did it start?
Lone, Lone it's good. It hasn't been on iTunes that long. It's an interesting experience in learning about distribution. About a year and a half ago, I made the film. I was friends with the manager of the musical artist Chelsea Wolfe, and Chelsea is a very, very special, unique performer, kind of treading a line between folk and goth and industrial. She's very, her performance and her music is very cinematic. She kind of eschews traditional verse, chorus, pop song structures, and treads more in a territory that's, chanteuse, industrial, voice specialists, and again, very cinematic. So when I went and heard, they said, "Do you want to do a video short film for a 10-minute song?" I heard the song, and I was like, wow, that's fucking amazing. And it built and kind of receded in a very primal way. I saw her live, and I said to her manager, I said, God, why don't we just do something longer? Why don't we make something with 5 songs, and why don't we make a film? And I was very inspired by her music, and I listened to the whole CD and kind of sequenced 5 songs, and we went and ended up making a 57-minute film for about $50,000, which is the cost of a medium-range pop video. It's the cost of about 1/3 of a day of a high-end commercial, if $150,000 is a high-end commercial budget. And I shot it with 2 epics. My assistant at the time, who has since become one of my DPs, we shot it over a 4-day period in the burned-out forest, the beach, a stage. And kind of, I described it as my Tarkovsky movie. I wrote a script, and I got a bunch of props and cast a bunch of people, and was not entirely sure what I was making, and that was the whole point of it, was I let the creation of it and let the subconscious take over, and the story that I know is in there, but I allowed myself to kind of tread in such deep, embedded places of my own mind, and let figures be symbolic and representative of shapes and shadows and archetypes in my own life and mindset, and set out to kind of shape the story and the journey and the kind of experience around her music and the accumulation of those images. I kind of edited it myself. I worked with a guy who helped me pull some of her performances together, and then kind of really just went into this immersive state, and spent about 4 months editing it. She was on tour, so it took a long time from the time I shot it to the time we completed it, and then it took an even longer time to get it out on iTunes. I loved it, and it kind of changed my whole way of thinking about filmmaking, because I just said, if I made one of these a year, I'd be very happy. But the lesson learned was it's 57 minutes, and soon after I finished it, I saw Under the Skin. I said, okay, the only difference between Under the Skin and Lone is that Under the Skin has a movie star, and Under the Skin is 80 minutes long, and Under the Skin has a little more plot. So I said, the next time I do one of these, I'm going to have a little more plot and have a movie star, or a star to sell it, but the very kind of freedom to explore this world came to me in that process. So when people say that it reminds them of a Jodorowsky movie, I had never seen a Jodorowsky movie, and then when I saw Holy Mountain, I was like, "Yep, I get it." Pretty loose, symbolic, experiential musical piece, and I'm really proud of it. And I've seen it on a big screen, and it's really beautiful and quite intense on a big screen. And I just tell everybody, anywhere, at any time, to please, watch it.
Yeah, I rented it on Vudu, and I watched it on my new TV, and I watched it over the weekend, and right away, it was just like a what the fuck. Yeah. And I sat there, and I just sat with it for for the duration of it, and I was taken aback by how unsettled I was while watching it, and after watching it, because I'm normally one that doesn't get unsettled or uneasy when I watch a film, and it was like to me it was this mixture of like I brought it up to Nick. It was like the end of the Tree of Life, but this alternate reality of it, and it was just like this Von Trier-ish, just nightmarish type deal. It was emotion in motion, and it just really it sat with me for a very long time afterwards. And I think with your films, particularly this one and I Melt With You and even Arlington Road and Mothman, I feel that you're a very reflective filmmaker, where you are challenging your audience with what you bring up on the screen to reflect inner feelings of your audience that are bounced back off the screen onto them, and I think that's fantastic. I think I just think it's brilliantly audacious, and I absolutely love it. I mean, everybody.
Alec, and my goal is to get, and I think that you can look back at Arlington Road and Mothman, which are very it's probably, I'd say, Lone is probably more of a cousin of Mothman, really, in terms of its space and sonically driven experiential, like chemical, like it really gets, the sound design really gets under your skin the same way that film does. And once you give yourself up to the lack of plot, I've had people that said, yeah, I started watching it and like, I couldn't tell what the story was, and I was like, good, because like, there is no plot. It's really the ride that you go on. But the reason it's changed me so much is I'm writing something else now that just says, great, well, I can write these kinds of movies. It's all how you get movies made. The problem is the minute you start to need movie stars and people to raise money, it's not a cheap medium. So you have to say, great, I'm going to go do this movie for $200,000 and try to like nobody would give you money for Lone. And the reason it was long is because it's music. You can let shots play out like poetry. It's not bound by some sort of story. And I would love to, and when I watch a Von Trier movie, or one of those things, I'm like, yep, that's the terrain, and until I can make a movie, a narrative 90-minute feature-length quasi-story in that style, that's my goal. So I'm writing things now and thinking, okay, what is that piece that's going to be that, where you can control it, where you can control the experience, and control the cut. Do you know what I mean? And
absolutely. I think
that's the goal. So I wear two hats. One is the artist and kind of personal filmmaker, and whether it's music-based stuff like Lone, or I'm doing a video in a couple weeks for Silver Sun Pickups, and it'll be like a 10-minute film, music video film. I love that terrain. And I can also be an interpreter for Blind Spot or somebody else's script. And there's two different headspaces that I kind of go into. Because I can't go to a $10 million pilot for NBC, which is the story, the script tells you what to do. Whereas on Lone, the music told me what to do. The freedom of the sound told me what to do. And I was sitting there edit and be like, oh, I want to hold on that shot of the hand or the man for 20 seconds. Like nothing was restricting my filmmaking, because the only person I had to please was the artist herself. And we were like, okay, so if we liked it and her audience likes it, and it played in some weird festivals in Europe and Chicago, like great, because it's just great. It'll play to 100 people in some arty, weird, fucked up festival in Chicago, and like great. Like that's I don't care. You know what I mean? You don't make it for millions of people. You make it for the people that it's out there forever. Forever and ever and ever, people can find it. And thanks to gatekeepers such as yourself, maybe if 10 people listen to your podcast and go to iTunes and watch it, that's great. Those are 10 people that wouldn't have done it before.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone to check it out, especially for people who are really interested in visual storytelling. For me, the strongest films and short films and any sort of communication, I always love it when things are visual, when you can tell a story with sounds, with the quality of light, texture, and for me, Lone was, like you said, had a Tarkovsky feeling. It has a Malick feeling. The under the skin feeling wasn't something that necessarily hit me until you brought it up, but absolutely. And as you said, it was sort of similar to Mothman. There's an expressionistic quality that Mothman Prophecies had that you don't find in your typical traditional, studio thriller. And you can absolutely see obviously the surrealism and the expressionistic nature of your style coming out in Lone big time. And I just think it's a very, as you said, audacious and exciting piece for somebody to watch who's interested in seeing emotion conveyed, through pictures and through sound and through music. The artist was someone who I was not familiar with at all. And I'm going to admit right up front, I'm very bad with music. I don't know people's names. It's a blind spot for me. But the music was so beautiful and haunting, and in conjunction with the visuals, you really got a sense of what you were going for, this sort of desperate search for, inner peace. That's sort of how I saw it.
There you go. That's at the core, probably, honestly, of everything, and probably at the core of a movie that I'm trying to mount called Clang. And that all comes from a documentary I made about my father. That's on my website called Father's Days. And I think that you just hit on the central theme is about trying to find peace. And I think it was in my work before, and then in 2004 when my wife passed away, it was in my work before she died, and it's certainly been the dominant engine in my work since then. In every music video in the last 10 years has basically been about grief in some way, shape, or form, or loss. So, that defining rod of life experience is what, I don't know what kind of film career I would have had if that event hadn't happened. It doesn't matter. No one knows what their life will be before or after something like that. So all I know is, you know what? It was a 10-year kind of place that I went. Grief never really ends, but you kind of go through to the other side. And last year, it was right after I finished Lone, and Lone was a big, big, big benchmark for me in terms of saying, you know what? I'm going to be the filmmaker that I want to be, and I'm not going to make another movie till I make it mine. and can separate the cathartic and the personal, like I Melt With You and Henry Poole, were very personal, two totally different movies, a 180 really tonally of each other, from sentimental and sad and sweet to nihilistic and dark, yet both are the kind of same movie, just through a different guise. And I think what's come out of it after 10 years is the commitment to finding that peace. And, knock on wood, an actor, a great actor that I met that was briefly interested in doing Kang, really, really well-regarded young actor who couldn't do it for a variety of reasons, said, it's about a guy trying to come find that peace. And that, I had been writing a script for 25 years. And it was not until he said it that it finally came complete to me. So when I realized I'm gonna tell that story, the story could be told in the form of Lone. It could be told in a feature film. I might do a photo book of it. There's a lot of ways to tell stories, and I think in the last couple of years I'm opening myself up to, taking my photography more seriously, or just I could do it as a play. There's a lot of ways to express yourself in this world, and not all of them involve getting on your knees, chasing money people or movie stars to be in your movies. And that's the frustrating bit that people like David Fincher, Lars von Trier, or any number of filmmakers who I admire, they don't seem to have that problem. Although I Melt With You was inspired by a lunch I had with Steven Soderbergh, and I said, would you ever put any of your own money into a movie? And Soderbergh was one of my heroes, and I took him to lunch, and he said, absolutely. You have to will a movie into happening. And I Melt With You got made because I just started writing the checks and started scouting and said, we're making the movie. And I wasn't going to wait for somebody to say, well, blah, blah, you just say, this is when we shoot. And I had enough money to start it rolling to convince somebody else to put a little more money into it to get it made. And we made it, got it all in the can for $800,000, which is very cheap in terms of,
that's a staggering number to think about, given how amazing the film looks and the people that were involved. And and I know Frank's going to jump in here because he's just, I know, dying to talk to you about I Melt With You.
Well, we spent a little more when I couldn't sell it at Sundance for the amount that I was hoping for, because we got eviscerated there. And my poor dear friend Cameron Crowe just ran through the ringer on Aloha. When it said it was the worst movie ever made, I wanted to write and say, no. Owen Gleiberman from Entertainment Weekly said, I Melt With You was the worst movie ever made, so Aloha can't possibly be the worst.
I want to see Aloha. I don't care what people say.
I made the worst film ever made, according to Owen Gleiberman.
Exactly.
You brought up cathartic filmmaking, and that's one of the things I took from I Melt With You. I mean, you know this. I've told you this prior, that I Melt With You is in my top 5 films of all time. That is one of my favorite films, and it's one of the best films I've ever seen. Every time I watch it, I take something new from it. It's a brand new experience. I never grow tired of it. It is just this tremendously hot, fast burn of a film that just, once it ignites, it just does not stop until the credits roll. And when the credits roll, it's like, oh my fucking God. But I wanted to ask you about that. When I first watch it, and every time I watch it, one of my absolute favorite things about the film is the opening title sequences of the self-hatred and shame and, the feelings that everybody has felt throughout their entire life, I think, regardless of your age. Some of them more so cater to older people. But how did that come about? Because that is just fierce right up front.
I was looking for, starting in 1985 at MTV, that's where I got my start doing promos. I used text. I always used a lot of text in MTV promos and my music videos. I was heavily inspired by a woman named Jenny Holzer, who was a text artist. And the use of simple statements is sometimes the clearest, simplest, declarative way to be in the mindset of a character. And I decided that I wanted to kind of be in the mindset of the composite male character, and if all of these characters could kind of speak their deepest fears and truths, what would they be? So I just took a piece of paper and just started writing them down and wrote a bunch of them and just put them in with a piece of a track that I had. And I said, oh, that'll just kind of set the table. That'll be kind of a way just to be like, what is this? This isn't, as opposed to, like a frame for the painting, if you will. And so I just, wrote a bunch and gave them to my designer, my type designer, Kyle Cooper, who had done the titles for Seven. He did the titles for Arlington Road, and he's always kind of done all my text work, whether I have a big budget or no budget. He's kind of on my team. And I just gave them to him, and he spit them back to me. And that was it.
That's fantastic, because when I watched the INXS Beautiful Girl music video, it was like the baby of I Melt With You. With the text coming up on screen, and I sent Nick a message right away, and I was like, dude, this is it. I'm like, this is just the the groundwork that was laid for I Melt With You with the opening text, and it was just...
The real big kahuna was a piece I did for U2 for Zoo TV in 1991, because U2 loved this show that I co-created called Buzz, which was a 13-episode mind fuck of a show that ran in 1990 for MTV, and William Burroughs did our voiceovers. There was no host. It was all projections and text, and it was like a subjective, televised acid show, 30-minute shows, themes. It was, as MTV said, it was weird, it's dark, it's depressing, it's arty, and it's expensive. You can't have all of them. But it had this great cult thing, and this is pre-internet, mind you. This is 1990, and U2 basically hired me to rip Buzz off in their multiple screen Zoo TV projection fiesta, and I did a thing for the song called The Fly, which was just the most assaultive language-based blast. I can send it to you. And it's a fucking outrageous just word assault. And so all of that stuff of words and harken back to my 20s, which in a way was the seed of where the characters for I Melt With You were in terms of their eternal optimism and promise. So in a way it was kind of a full circle. And I made the film to say goodbye to 4 aspects of in the male psyche of shame, greed, ego, addiction, so it was an allegory, really, where the characters kind of, for me, represented those aspects that needed to die. And my friend Glenn Porter, I took his script and we worked on it together to try and retool it. It was still the same story, it was still the same structure, and the guys partying and all killing themselves, yet I was able to personalize it in that way, and find my way into why I needed to do it. My mother had passed away. I was deeply into grief. I had fallen off the wagon of sobriety. So in making the film, I came out the other side, got sober again. So that was 4 years ago. I'm still sober. And kind of I got it out of my system. And what I got out of my system was saying goodbye to that fearful side of myself that, I did not need to tread in those emotions anymore. I got rid of them by the film.
Well, it's a personal piece, yeah.
That's some ugly, raw shit for people to see. And I remembered maybe a year later, I was watching Flight, and the reaction I met with you, the people's hatred of it, really stung me at the time. Now it's like a badge of honor. But at the time, it really kind of was a little hurtful, because no one likes to be fucking, no one likes to be raked across the coals like that. But when you realize, like a year later, I was watching Flight, right, the Denzel film.
Yep.
Right.
And I see him as an alcoholic. Really, he was difficult to watch. He was a great portrayal of an alcoholic. The isolationism, the kind of, you're like, man, this is tough. This is a tough thing to watch. I'm like, wait a second. So wait, I had 4 of these guys. I had 4 white guys that were entitled, partying, people that, like, unless you had those kind of experiences with drugs or males, you hated the film. Like, I would meet some of the critics who were like, you hated those guys. You hated those guys when you were 25. You hate those guys now that you're 40 or 30 or whatever. I mean, we literally at Sundance met these people who the night before had posted the most vicious reviews, and the next day at the press junket, you had to meet them, and the guy would come up and be like, well, I really had some issues with your movie. It was very transgressive. I'm like, yeah. But I could just tell the guy had never sat up all night doing blow with his buddies, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that that's acceptable behavior. I was portraying a behavior that a lot of guys I knew had gone through, a lot of friendships where somebody could say shit to their friends that's way, way, way overboard, but that, it was a certain type of male relationship and a certain type of, in a way that's kind of that's not in politically correct ways to be anymore. Do you know what I mean? I love this backlash now from Seinfeld or Chris Rock or these comedians that are saying, man, fucking kids and audiences now are so PC that you can't say anything in front of them. Like, literally, the comedy world is revolting now because audiences are so offended, so easily offended, which then conversely raises the shock value higher. And I find it just interesting that, like, ooh, I don't like those guys, or ooh, they're these rich white guys, fuck them, and like, boy, did I thought it was a little experimental movie that no one would see, and it gets just judged the same way that some big studio movie does. In terms sure.
I think one of the things that happens too, Mark, is when you make a film that is so intense and it shows a behavior that so many people have had some experiences with, they don't want to be reminded of it. And I think that it also, to Frank's, point before about how your work is very reflective of things, it holds up. I Melt With You is a film that holds a mirror up to people's behavior and their actions and their reactions, and people sometimes don't want to be reminded that they are capable of that sort of behavior or feeling the things that you presented with that film. It's an incredibly emotional film. It's overwhelming at times, and for a casual viewer, sometimes that might not be where they want to go. But I think that the best pieces of art are typically born out of a need to tell a story, and as you said, you put money into your own projects. Whenever that occurs, clearly the person behind it is has a reason to make the piece of art they're doing. I always think about the stories I've read and heard about Tarsem making The Fall, the movie that he wanted to make so bad, and nobody wanted to give him the money, so he maxed out his credit cards or whatever, paid for it all with his own money, funded that movie with all this commercial money, which is just staggering to think about. But one of the things I wanted to actually just sort of bridge...
He spent millions on that movie, because I know the guy
millions of dollars of his own money.
Certain shoots. I mean, the guy's a visual genius. He would piggyback certain images on his shoots.
Yeah.
And,
I've been enamored with that film. It's just, I saw it in the theater with my wife when we weren't married at the time, but we saw it and we were just completely blown away. Had a chance to see it on the big screen, and it has sat with me for the last 8 years. It's just an overwhelmingly gorgeous piece of art. I love how he told the story visually.
Should have just skipped the story though. The dopey thing in the hospital with Lee Pace. Just like what
I liked about
Cell. You should just forget it. Just do his Koyaanisqatsi. If I met him, I'd say, dude.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, the imagery is Baraka, and it's
just fuck the story.
But I actually like the story because it's so layered and dark. Like here's this guy convalescing with a broken heart because he can't get with the woman he loves because the lead in his western is run off with her into the sunset, and he's slowly killing himself with morphine and this bizarre relationship with the girl. I just think it's a one-of-a-kind movie, and I don't want to digress too much, but one of the things I think that your work has done so strong is put the viewer in the immediate place of the action, whether it be on that bridge in Mothman Prophecies, which I still don't understand how that sequence was created and crafted without seemingly CGI or anything like that, to the overwhelming...
No CGI. No CGI.
It doesn't, I mean, I have to be honest, I was revisiting the film. I've seen it a bunch of times, but I was revisiting it, and the thing that struck me about Mothman is just how unreal of a sequence that is, and it just looks flawless. You have so much happening.
It was real. Everything was practical. A stunt bridge. The collapse of the bridge was a model, 1/6 scale. No CGI. One CGI shot, stupid, coming from a factory through the bridge. Dumb.
Oh yeah, the establishing shot. Yeah, but you know,
terrible.
Yeah. I can't believe that you
were... 2 green screen shots in the whole thing from a high angle where you see some people running, but everything else was practical. Practical.
And it looks it. And in this day and age of over CGI saturation, we're huge fans. Hopefully you saw Mad Max Fury Road and just absolutely lost our minds. Yeah, just insane. But again, not to digress too much here. Your ability to put people in the moment, whether it be with the guys getting wasted in I Melt With You, or to my personal favorite film of your career, which is Arlington Road, which is a film that I also saw with my wife. My wife and I are high school sweethearts. So we had a chance to see a lot of films together back in the day, and we're revisiting them now. And we actually had a chance to see, if you can believe it, a long lead test screening press thing in Connecticut, of all states, back in the day when they actually did this stuff here. And I remember seeing Arlington Road. I was 19 at the time, and it just blew me away. And I've always wanted to find out how you guys were able to get away with everything in that film. The ending, nobody debated it. Was it? And this was and I would love for you just to tell me, this was a Screen Gems production that was financed by Lakeshore. Is that how
Arlington Road? Let me tell you, there were 3. There was the original scripted ending of the film, which was Jeff Bridges' son stays with Tim Robbins, right? Stays with him.
Yeah, I know.
The original, which we tested, which women hated.
I know. It's an extra gut punch. It's an extra gut punch. It's unreal.
There's never a question of killing the hero. Polygram made the film. Polygram was a European company. So Polygram funded the movie. And after we finished the film, Polygram went belly up, and Universal owned Polygram. Universal looked at the film, a wise executive and head of Universal named Ron Meyer saw the movie and said, shelve it. Put it out on DVD. Fuck it. Never going to see the light of day. Tom Rosenberg.
And that was because he didn't want to go out with the ending.
He hated the movie. Doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm not in Ron. You can call Ron Meyer, but he hated the movie. Said fuck this and just like dump it. Tom Rosenberg, who was the head of Lakeshore, who had financed the movie with Polygram, right? So Polygram, Tom was a producer, financed it with Polygram. It was his movie. He bought it back. Great balls on this guy. Unbelievable vision. He bought it back from Universal and then sold it to Screen Gems. I'm certain for a fact that Tom lost money on it because there's no way that he, they probably pre-sold. Lakeshore held all the foreign rights, right? But I know that the domestic was probably, I'm sure he took a bath on it, bought it back, sold it to Screen Gems for Screen Gems to release. And
at the time, was Screen Gems owned by Sony?
Yes, they were, and they still are.
Yes. So technically, a studio was. So technically, Sony then somebody at Sony must have seen it and didn't have the same complaints that Ron Meyer did.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember whoever Clint Culpepper at Screen Gems worked for. I mean, whoever was at the head of Sony, surely, yeah, they obviously had to sign off on it.
Yeah.
So Screen Gems released it. It got delayed. It got delayed because of Columbine. We shot it we were done shooting it by the spring of '98. I finished it. I think it was delivered and finished by the late fall of '98. It was supposed to come out, and you'd have to just tell me when Columbine was, and that would tell me when it got delayed from, and then it came out in the summer. I was like, what the fuck are you doing releasing this in the summer?
Yeah, it's just the ultimate fall movie. It has no business being released in the summer, but yeah, I always felt that.
Remember this, in 1999, the delineation of award season fall, serious film, summer blockbuster was not nearly as pronounced as it is now. People did not at that point live and breathe by opening weekends. I remember Jeff Blake, who was the head of distribution and marketing at Sony. I remember he called me at 2:00 in the afternoon, LA time, and he said, "Yep, I think we're on track for a blah, blah, blah $1 million weekend." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I think it's going to end up grossing this." And I said, "How do you know?" He goes, "Well, based on the numbers of the first day." That's where I learned, oh, wait a second. He can figure out by Friday, Saturday, and Sunday what it's going to make, do it times 3.5, and that's the estimated gross for the film. The film was made for $21 million. They probably acquired it for $5 or $6 million. So they made money. They made money on it.
It's still one of the quintessential thrillers of my lifetime, and I put it right next to something like The Parallax View and 3 Days of the Condor. I'm still in awe of the 70s spirit that movie was made in, and you obviously brought that terrific late 90s style to it, and I just find it to be so incredibly engrossing. And when you've seen the film and you know the twist and you're able to go back and watch it again, it's one of those movies like David Fincher's The Game, where sort of at the end. It was as
good as The Game. Come on, The Game is perfect. The
Game is also another one of my absolute favorites. We'll be shining a light on that one in one of our podcasting coming up. I'm glad to hear that you're a fan of The Game. I've been obsessed with it for years.
Same here.
Aaron Kruger consciously wrote it to be the contemporary version of The Parallax View, and instead, in The Parallax View, assassination, that was the fear button for America, right? It was like, oh my God, it was right after, RFK and Martin Luther King. You're still less than 10 years away from JFK. So assassinating one of your leaders was just like, ooh, that scares the fuck out of me. And then when he wrote it, domestic terrorism was the chiller. That was the chiller now. And now if you made it, because believe me, somebody came to me and said, I want you to make Arlington Road again. My first thing was like, okay, well, let's get the script. And what would be somebody's setting up a terrorist act at the Grove, okay, post 9/11, what would it be, right, that would shock people? Like, how could you shock people? If you were writing a movie and be like, and then a couple of fucking planes fly into a building, wow, okay? You're like, okay, so what's the wow factor? What could you do now to blow people away and subvert their expectations?
It's truly a film that came out really at the only time that it could have come out. Watching it again last night from start to finish, I am so reminded of how incredibly ballsy it was, and how it just would never, ever, ever get made in this political and social and Hollywood climate unless somebody made it with their own money, independently, with or without a big star, or whatever. It really is a one-of-a-kind thriller that I just, again, I
think it's so... movies where the hero dies, where I don't know, I'd have to Google that. Where
What'd you say?
The movies where the hero dies. Like, what movies have been bummer endings?
Yeah, I mean, look at something like, Fassbender doesn't die in The Counselor, but look at the audience and critical rejection of something ultra-nihilistic and pessimistic like The Counselor. Now, I know it's not a political thriller, but that was a film where you had major movie stars getting offed in really graphic ways. I don't know how you feel about that film. Frank and I are over the moon for it. I think it's...
But Arlington Road was like a thriller built to be, and the good guy's going to save the day.
Well, that's what's so exciting about it.
Like here's for example, I was watching, before we did Blind Spot, they said, you've got to go see The Blacklist. Watch The Blacklist. And I'm watching The Blacklist, and I'm seeing, like, there's the little girl. The terrorists have attached a bomb in a little girl's backpack. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna get scared, because they're not gonna have the balls to fucking blow up the kid.
Right.
Somebody looked at me and said, well, weren't you at all tense? I said, dude, I made fucking Arlington Road. Are you kidding me? Like, I know they're not gonna blow the kid up, so it's not shocking. Like, to really shock you, like, holy fuck. Like, what is it gonna be to shock you? And that's what Arlington Road did. From the first time I read the script, all the way through doing it, you're like, the same feeling, because the expectations and the architecture of it were, this is going to happen, and it just fucking pulled the rug out. Like, it pulled the rug out from the lead character, and in the holy shit, everybody knew about it except you. Literally, I can get literally hairs grow on the side of my thing. The same time that I read the script is the same feeling. It was on the page. Every time people say what a great movie, I say, great script, and I worked really hard on it, and I'm super proud of it. And thanks to guys like you, it can keep finding more and more life and more, fans.
Well, listen, again, it's been a film that's captured my imagination for years, and I've returned to it on any number of occasions, from that amazing opening sequence with Bridges finding the kids, like the stuff of real nightmares, and the way he smashes in. One of my absolute favorite shots and edits in any movie is when Jeff Bridges kicks open those doors and he's screaming, and then he flips out. I don't know his name. That whole thing.
I don't know his name.
Yeah.
Score and awesome. And then the track for the opening titles. When my music supervisor gave me that track, I was like, "Fuck!" And it just it was like so like heavy and just nasty and fucked up and hellish. It was like he was being swallowed into not knowing, and the whole thing was just this like, "Oh, I'm just gonna suck you into fucking hell."
Yep. And there's so few films that seemingly these days want to take you on that ride. You know, I mean, this is back in the '90s. You could feel like you could get away with it. You know, between Seven with, you know, spoiler alert, The Head in the Box, and, you know, Arlington Road, and, you know, The Game being this sort of sick and twisted, you know, metaphor for suicide prevention, if you want to look at it that way.
Or 9/11. 9/11.
Yeah, 9/11 changed the whole dynamic, and you sort of lost the appeal of the anti-hero, and, you know, it became sort of rah-rah there again for a while. And now I think that hopefully, because of, you know, the one exciting thing I think for people like you, filmmakers like you, where you're obviously interested in doing something that's going to appeal to you on a personal level, the European money and the smaller producers and people like Megan Ellison, those are the people I'm hoping are really going to be able to, especially Megan Ellison. I'm just blown away by her taste in projects, you know, with her company. These are the people I'm hoping that are going to be able to push forward sort of the challenging films that we were getting in the 70s and it's part of the 80s, and then definitely in the 90s again. So
I don't know about that. We'll see.
I hope.
I'm turning into a pumpkin here in 1 minute. So
no worries. We just say thank you.
Just wrap up real quick.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. I told you about this before, but my longtime special lady friend, who I recently initiated to I'm Out With You, thinks I'm now a rock star because she is the world's biggest Pearl Jam fan.
Oh, right on.
And this puts her like a couple degrees away from Eddie Vedder now, so I can't thank you enough for that.
Sure.
She doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can talk about her. But seriously, this is an extremely proud moment for me. I'm Out With You is just, I can't say enough about it. I could gush about it forever.
Thanks.
And this is just such an honor to talk to you about it and your filmography, man. It's been incredible.
Well, tell your fans, and let's just stay in touch. Let's stay in touch and I'll keep showing you new stuff and filling you in on what I'm doing, and I'll keep telling people about your podcast and vice versa. You know, let's keep changing the world one day at a time.
Very generous of you, Mark.
For sure, man. Thank you very much.
All right. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Take care, you too.
Man. See ya.